Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you once again. It is the first Monday of the month, which means it is Request Monday, and we're doing one of my all-time favorite bands and one of yours as well, Savatage, and we're doing Edge of Thorns. But before we get there, Bud, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. I really went down the old Savatage rabbit hole as predicted, and I guess not really all that surprising, but it's always nice to kind of remind myself how much I really do love this band. Sometimes it's kind of hard to believe that they haven't done anything in like 20 years as far as releasing new material goes. So yeah, it looks like we might have a new tradition of covering a Savatage album in December every year.
I think so. We did Dead Winter Dead last year. We're doing another Zach album this year by request. I think next year we'd be remiss not to do a classic John Oliva disc, just because, work our way backwards a little bit. But I'll tell you, with these guys, no matter how many times I hear them, no matter how much of a break there is in between the months or years that some of the stuff I haven't heard in a while, it never gets old. And I think that that's just a testament to the songwriting and all that, which we'll get to for sure. But before we get there, any new stuff this week? I certainly have a little concert review because I got to go to a show this week, which I'll get to in a second. But why don't you talk about some of the new stuff you heard?
Well, it looks like Hammerfall has a new album coming out next year called Hammer of Dawn, and they released the title track and music video. So that was, I actually have not had a chance to listen to the entire song yet. But the things that I have seen have been positive. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And, also this came across, I think through one of the Prog Power Facebook groups or whatever, but, a new band called New Horizon has a song called We Unite, which if you're a fan of just good old fashioned melodic metal, there's members from Mustache, Dragon Force, Dynasty, Heat, and Temple Balls, amongst others, making up this band. And the first single, We Unite, is a really fantastic song. Great stuff. Not typically, not unlike Frontiers to release, a band like this. But I was impressed at first listen.
Yeah, you sent me that track earlier in the week, and I was very impressed. I hadn't heard of these guys, or I guess I kind of wasn't aware that this quote unquote super group was coming together. But job well done. I look forward to hearing the rest. And I haven't heard the Hammerfall either, but needless to say, I'll check that out when we're done. I got to go to a show this week. Swallow the Sun is on tour right now with Abigail Williams and Wilderun, which is kind of a unique package. Wilderun obviously is kind of like a progressive death metal band, more progressive than the death metal, but the vocals sometimes lend itself to that for sure. I had the pleasure of seeing them on 70,000 Tons. They are a great band, so anytime I get to check them out, I try. They only played for about a half an hour, which for them was 3 tracks, but it was really good to hear. And we got to hear the new song Passenger, which we, I think, had mentioned on the podcast a couple of weeks back. So that was really cool. Abigail Williams was a band I had never heard of, a U.S. black metal band. And I guess maybe I was feeling it after our episode a couple of weeks ago. Quite good for what it is. Not always my go-to, but surprisingly tight for a black metal band. I thought that they put on a pretty decent show. And Swallow the Sun, a band that you kind of have to be in the right mood or the right headspace to listen to. They're a little bit melancholy and dark, and obviously they use a blend of both cleans and growls. But my God, they put on a really good show, and I was surprised at how good of a live performance it was. So I look forward to catching them again. I have a feeling they will be back in the next couple of years for other shows and whatnot. So I look forward to catching them. Definitely a good show, and worth seeing if it comes around to your area.
I believe they're playing here in Rochester at some point. I have tickets to see Unleash the Archers next week with Seven Kingdoms and Aether Realm, which is going to be my first metal concert in 2+ years. So I'm really pretty amped about it, even though it's in the middle of the week. I may have to call in sick the next day. I guess we'll see what happens. But I'm pumped because if you recall, their most recent album, Abyss, was my album of the year last year, and I look forward to hearing some of that material performed live. Brittany is always just such a flabbergastingly incredible live singer. How she's able to do what she does, like in the studio in person, is incredible. And she seems to do it with like minimum effort too.
Yeah, it is incredible, and I have to say they got a lot tighter live. I caught them on the last leg of the tour, which I guess was about 2 months ago at this point. It's funny because I remember seeing them a bunch of years ago and never thinking that they were, anything special live. I thought they were fine. I thought they were good. I enjoyed the show because I enjoyed the music. But to your point, the newest album is so good and their live performance has gotten so much better. The future is very bright for them, and they're kind of leading the charge in North America for that style of power metal, I guess you'd call it, or a blend of power metal and just, straightforward like rock. It's just well done, and I the future is definitely bright there. So I'm glad you're going to get to see that show. It'll definitely be a good time.
Yep, I'm very, very excited. It's time to get back into things because, man, I miss seeing live bands. I've seen very few since the last time Prog Power took place, and I haven't seen a metal show. I mean, unless you want to count Trans-Siberian Orchestra, but even that was 2 years ago, and that was. So, yeah, I'm well overdue. It's
definitely time. But I look forward to hearing more about that and kind of your rundown next week. But let's talk about the reason why we're here. Brian Clough, longtime listener of the show, he wanted to hear some Savatage, and had him do a little write-up kind of explaining what his, why Edge of Thorns and why this particular album. And I guess it's just a good lead-in to the discussion from this album that came out in 1993. He says, Edge of Thorns was my introduction to Savatage. In my opinion, this album was the perfect storm, meaning Chris Oliva was in his prime, John Oliva was still involved in the writing process, and they brought in Zach Stevens on board to round out the lineup. According to John, he had actually helped handpick his replacement behind the mic. His voice was shot, according to him, after the Streets tour, so it was time to step down. And Edge of Thorns still had all the elements that made Savatage great, but they were able to add a more radio-friendly lead singer for the times. And in my opinion, Edge of Thorns is the perfect place for a newcomer to begin exploring Savatage. It encompasses all of what the band had accomplished before, while allowing listeners a glimpse as to what was to come. And I think that's a great point we'll definitely hit on. And this obviously includes Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Unfortunately, Edge of Thorns would be the last album to feature Chris Oliva on guitar, as he was tragically taken in a vehicle accident on October 17th, 1993. This makes this album all the more important within the history of Savatage. All the tracks on this album are stellar, but my favorites remain the title track, an absolute anthem, All That I Bleed, a song in which Zach hasn't pushed his voice that far since, and Damien, an overlooked gem. To the Metal Exchange podcast listeners out there, I hope you'll enjoy this episode as much as I will. If you're new to this band, then you're starting at the perfect place for exploring what I believe to be the greatest metal band of all time. And yes, I said it, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. So a very nice write-up, and it kind of leads us right into this album. This album came out, as I said, in the spring of 1993. My question for you is, I know we didn't really start listening to Savatage for another 4 or 5 years after this. This wasn't the first Savatage song or album that you had heard. Is that kind of accurate?
Definitely. My first metal album ever was Handful of Rain, which was released a year after this. And then I believe I got Gutter Ballet shortly after that. And I want to say I even had Dead Winter Dead prior to Edge of Thorns. This was, I think, the last of the Zach albums that I got. Maybe outside of Wake of Magellan, which wasn't released in the US as of yet, but I probably got this around the same time as that one. So I was more familiar with Streets, Gutter Ballet, Handful of Rain, and those albums. This one I kind of got to kind of like fill in the discography, I remember I think I ordered this and Stradivarius's Visions album, because I was missing both of those in my collection. So or episode, I don't know. I just remember it being Stradivarius, but so yeah, I picked this up a little bit later on, and I think the only song I was really familiar with was the title track. So all this stuff was pretty new to me when I got the album, and I was definitely curious to hear this one album that Zach Stevens and Chris Oliva got to share a little bit of space on. So it was a little bit later on, but yeah, I remember liking it quite a bit, and it's interesting that I started with Handful of Rain because it was such a weird album where there was so much like turmoil and turnover with the band at the time. This was supposed to be kind of like this new era going forward, and unfortunately it didn't really work out that way with Chris getting killed by a drunk driver in a car accident. It's a loss that I think we all still feel to this day. So whenever I hear this album, I just think about the one time Zach and Chris got to work together, and it's pretty cool because there's a lot of, I think in the guitar work there's a lot of callback to the earlier Savatage, but yet you have this new singer who, for me, I mean, him and John are two of my all-time favorite vocalists ever, and two guys that couldn't sound more different as singers.
And somehow it works with the band, which is interesting because they do a lot of bonus tracks where John actually does acoustic versions of Zach's songs, and yet it works even though their styles are so different. And I'm sure we'll get to that in the future. And also, you mentioned Handful of Rain. That's really more of like a John Oliva solo project. And even though a lot of guys got credit, including Alex Skolnick from Testament, in terms of his help on the album, my understanding is that was basically a John Oliva solo effort, and he just kind of put the names on there. Now, again, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I have heard that he was basically recording all the guitars and all the keys, and he may have even done the drums on the album. That's a fascinating piece of music, and it comes out, like you said, just a year after this. Another one that we'll have to do in the future for sure. But I think that we often talk about transitional albums. This is most certainly that. And while I think that you can definitely hear pieces of Gutter Ballet and Streets and even Hall of the Mountain King on Edge of Thorns, you also hear pieces of what would become Dead Winter Dead, or pieces of what would become The Wake of Magellan in small spots as well. So it really is that like transition from the 80s metal Savatage to the more progressive Savatage that they become in the 90s, if that makes sense.
Right. I wonder, though, what the band would have been had Chris stayed alive. I feel like this was supposed to be... I mean, it still ended up being a transition, but I think it was supposed to be a different kind of transition. But it is a very interesting album, to say the least. And I have to say, and I know we've talked about it before, but for a longtime singer to kind of step back and bring in somebody new... I mean, like you said, we weren't really fans at the time, but it seems to me that Zach's placement in the band was pretty well received. You think of like the hard time Andy Darris has gotten from replacing Michael Kiske, or even, Sammy Hagar replacing David Lee Roth, like to come in an established band and just take over with a completely different style. I mean, I got into both eras of Savatage at the same time. So to me, like they were always there. It wasn't a transition for me. It was just kind of like, this is what the band used to sound like, and this is what the band sounds like now. So, the first two songs I ever heard were Gutter Ballet and Chance. So it was kind of like a best of both worlds kind of situation. So yeah, I think that Zach comes in here and he does such a great job that I think the fans were sold on him right away. I could be wrong, but that's my, at least like revisionist history. It seems like people love Zach. And the fact that later on, the band would kind of become Zach with John contributing vocals to, a couple of tracks. We discussed Dead Winter Dead. He also sings two songs on Wake of Magellan, and then would go on to sing the entire Poets and Madmen album. So I don't know. To me, like, I always see Savatage as kind of a two-headed monster, and like, I don't think I really could pick one over the other. I love both guys, their styles so much in their own way, and having seen both of them do their work live, it's a dream to have seen, you know, Zach sing all of Wake of Magellan and John sing all of Streets. Just, you know, I could sit here and gush about this band all day long. They were my first love in metal, and every time I go back and listen to them, I'm just reminded of how much this band means to me. And I think that it sometimes just gets lost because they don't exist really anymore, and haven't for, you know, most of the last 20 years. And I think that there's such a desire from that fan base for them to kind of crawl back from the ashes and start doing something again. I think that Wacken show that they did was kind of a tease of what could be. And unfortunately, Paul O'Neill, you know, died after that, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra is continuing on, and they added a classic Savatage track to their tour this year, A Little Too Far, from the Streets album. So they're kind of sprinkling in a little bit of Savatage influence each year. They did Handful of Rain last year. So yeah, they still kind of exist, but I think people just want to see that classic lineup or some combination of it. I would love to see the Dead Winter Dead Wake of Magellan lineup with, you know, Al Pitrelli and Jeff Plate and Caffrey, and with both singers, and you know, Johnny Lee. That would be, to me, like the ultimate Savatage lineup.
To me, they need to do
maybe
one
have
of those.
Dr. Killdrum show up for a couple of older tunes, but I mean,
Honestly,
that's what I would.
I was just about
like
to say they need to do kind of the Halloween thing where they just bring both lineups together, right? And they just kind of switch off for the different songs before they do this like one more farewell blowout tour. When you play a show in front of 60,000 people in Germany, there's clearly a clamoring for this, right? They headlined Wacken that year. It was no coincidence that they headlined. They played on both stages, and they just like tore the place up. I saw about an hour of that material, and it's just absolutely incredible. It's interesting to me that for a band that kind of fizzled out in terms of touring after Poets and Madmen, where they were playing small clubs, and I caught them twice on that tour. Very memorable shows, but obviously Zach Stevens was not with them. To then go, less than 20 years later and to play in front of a crowd of 60,000, I think that the diehards are still there. And I think that if you go to those Trans-Siberian Orchestra shows, you always get the Savatage fans that are just clamoring for that stuff. So for them to sprinkle in songs from Streets and whatnot, very, very cool. And, I just, as I go back and I listen to this stuff, what I think separates them from other bands is just phenomenal songwriting. Yes, Chris Oliva was a master at the guitar. There's no question about that. He is one of the most underrated and underappreciated, but at the same time, one of the most beloved figures in all of the guitar world. But John Oliva's songwriting is so good, and the lyrics, by and large, are so good. It separates them from a lot of their peers and a lot of other bands, and that's why they're timeless in many ways. And I'm going to throw this out there. It kind of reminds me of the Beatles, and I happen to know that Oliva is a big Beatles fan. Not that the music is like the Beatles, but the songs are timeless, and that's what you have with this stuff. So I'm happy that Brian picked this because it's just, like I said, it's a very, very interesting album, and I was curious for me whether it was going to hold up the way it did, over 25 years ago when I first heard it, whether this nostalgia was going to hold up, because it had been a while. And it did. I'm not going to say that every song was as good as I remembered it. There's a couple of duds in my opinion, but by and large, this is just, another in the long line of fantastic Savatage albums.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Honestly, just, it's great stuff. And, I couldn't agree more about the songwriting is so timeless, and it's just great. Like, there's just, I feel like the songwriting stayed excellent even after Chris passed away, and I think that a lot of credit goes to John and Paul for that. Speaking of the Beatles,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, let's. Why don't we dive in?
Let's do it. We're going to begin with Brian's track of the week, which is "Edge of Thorns," the title track.
An offering of reasons, we put them all in play. A covering of treasons that one by one we let slip away. A solitary dancer, so lost upon her stage. I have seen you on the edge of dawn, felt you here before you were born, balanced your dreams upon the edge of thorns, but I don't think about you anymore.
Dare I say the most iconic Savatage opening song of all time, and if people that bought this as a blind purchase in 1993, they were not disappointed with the new direction that the band would kind of start gravitating towards, because this is, to this day, one of probably the most top 3, top 5 iconic Savatage tracks. Fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so. I had no idea. I picked this up on Wikipedia that the opening piano riff was used on The Real World. I had no idea. I guess during scenes that involved Pedro, who he was like one of the first TV stars. I mean, we're talking about probably the first reality show ever, and he was one of the first reality show television stars who had HIV and AIDS. He was openly gay, and he, when he passed away, it was kind of a thing because people knew him from this Real World series and what he was going through, and so the fact that they used the opening piano riff to Edge of Thorns, I had no clue. That is really mind-boggling, or not mind-boggling, just mind-blowing, I should say. I can't even believe it. I know there was a music video made. I can't imagine it got a lot of play on MTV in 1993, but yeah, I mean, to me, I hear this song and it's definitely one of the most iconic Savatage songs. I remember after Circle to Circle played all of Wake of Magellan at Prague Power, I after they finished the album, I was like, oh man, I gotta run and grab a drink, whatever. And as I'm leaving, all of a sudden I hear the opening piano riff to Edge of Thorns, and I just run right back into the venue to hear. I was like, oh, I'm not missing this one. So it was cool hearing Zach sing that live. But yeah, this is a really phenomenal song, and I don't really think that I don't know. I remember when we talked about Pretty Maids, you were saying that it was kind of like a band trying to find its identity, and I feel like this album kind of goes all over the place too. And it might be, I don't know if it's like a combination of Chris and John's songwriting with Paul involved. It's kind of strange, some of the songs, how they don't really sound like one another, and this one I think
it's all over the place.
Stands on its own.
It's all over the place. This particular track has this phenomenal keyboard intro, and if you listen to John Oliva play it live, he fucks this up every single time. It's kind of funny. It's almost like, I think he pats himself on the back, Barry Horowitz style, when he actually gets this right, because it's like such a joke, because I don't know, he can't seem to play it live. But once you listen to the track, it gets stuck in your head. It's the longest track on the album, and I don't think I ever realized that, but it's the longest track on the album. And to me, it's just a modern gutter ballet. That's what I hear when I hear this song. It's just a nod to gutter ballet. Everything from the phenomenal lyrics, the awesome guitar riff about midway through the song that kind of gives way to a classic Chris Oliva guitar solo. There's even a bass solo on this song, which is something that we really don't talk about when you talk about Savatage. as much as Johnny Lee Middleton holds the low end together, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, I think. But they gave him a bass solo on the first track on this album, short but sweet. Just an absolute classic, and a very good choice for Song of the Week. It's not mine, but Brian, I think, with good reason. This is the first Savatage song he heard, and I can understand why he would choose it.
It might be mine. I don't know yet. It's hard to choose because I have a lot of songs that I like a lot on this album, and then there's some other songs I can guarantee you didn't even sniff Song of the Week. So
totally, and that's the thing. I think it's a little, I don't want to say unbalanced, but it is a little all over the place. He Carves His Stone, the second track, starts with a different intro than the first because you have this real slow guitar with the kind of like the cymbal in the background before the vocals kick in. And then when it kicks in, my God, with the chorus, it kicks off with a bang and it gets real heavy real fast. I love the verses here, but the choruses are a bit repetitive and boring. I'm not a huge fan of this particular track. It's fine. But the real star here is Zach Stevens. Some of the vocal notes that he hits, especially towards the end of this song when it really begins to pick up, I don't know how he does it. And I think it's worth noting, they found him with another band called Wicked Witch. I guess that was like his first band before Savatage. I've never heard a note from them. And I guess I really should go back and listen to it or see if I can dig up their stuff, because I can't even imagine what a younger Zach Stevens would kind of sound like. But, it's out there, and this song kind of is a nod to that, because this is a young Zach Stevens in his prime, and it makes up for what's otherwise kind of like a mediocre song, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that this song has a lot of nods to the older Savatage sound. I like the way that it kind of starts out in this kind of slow acoustic way. I think they use that style in the past, and they'll use it again on Handful of Rain and subsequent albums. I agree with you that like the chorus is just okay, but this is definitely a song that grew on me over the years. It's not my least favorite song on the album, although it probably is towards the bottom. But I do like this song. I think that the guitar solo is phenomenal. It really is just Chris Oliva tearing it up. I think that's the real highlight of this song is after the second chorus, when you just hear Chris do his stuff. And yeah, like you said, Zach just does a really great job singing. So I think it kind of makes sense as the second track. It kind of brings things down a little bit after such a like massive like hit like Edge of Thorns. I like this song, but again, not my favorite. But
it's in the middle for
me
too.
There's only one song on this album I don't care for, and
I'm
we'll
curious
get
to
to
see
it.
if it's the same as mine.
I'm willing to bet that it is.
All right. Well, we'll bring in Scraggy at that point, but we're not there yet. So let's see if it's the same thing. The third track is Lights Out, and this is like a short little banger. Begins with a really cool guitar solo. Again, here I love these like kind of hard rockish verses. Not my favorite chorus, but it's not terrible. It's kind of like a groovy little song with a grunge feel to it, almost a nod to like kind of like a Nirvana song in many ways. It's a little weird. I also hear some Skid Row in there as well. I think that this song is what it needs to be. I think if it was any longer, I would probably not like it as much as I do. But for what it is, I think it's actually an improvement over He Carves His Stone, and a good third track. It
actually kind of reminds me of Nothing's Going On, which would be on the following album, Handful of Rain. And oddly enough, was Chris Oliva has co-songwriting credits on that song, so maybe there's something to that. But yeah, I like these kind of like speedy, kind of catchy Savatage songs. Let me ask you something. Did you notice anything weird about the drums when you were listening to this album? I never noticed it until this week, and now I can't not hear it.
I didn't notice until it got spoiled for me, and then I haven't been able to unhear it. Would you want to let the cat out of the bag as to why the drums sound a little peculiar on this record?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was listening to it, and I was like, is he using a drum machine? It doesn't sound like legit drums. And sure enough, I jumped onto Wikipedia before we came on here, and it says that Steve Wackles chose to use electronic drums. I don't know that it's a bad sound. I think it's actually impressive how real the drums sound in certain parts. But there's certain parts where you can just kind of tell. I don't think it takes away from anything. I just thought it was an interesting choice and not something I'd ever noticed until recently. Or really
that was
today. Maybe might have been the first time I noticed it.
definitely news to me. But then like you said, I couldn't unhear it after that. So an interesting choice and something that he hadn't employed on any of the albums before this. So I don't know.
And he wouldn't drum on a Savatage album again after this. I mean,
that's right.
Like you mentioned before, he was credited on Handful of Rain, but I don't think that he actually did any actual drum work. I think, according to Wikipedia, he had already left the band by the time the album was recorded. And so, like you said, John Oliva did the drums and the bass and the rhythm guitar and the piano, keyboards, and backing vocals. It was really
it's a solo album.
It's him and Skolnick and Zach Stevens, pretty much. Just, I think Skolnick handled
some of
all the solos because I don't think John felt comfortable doing what Chris was doing, so he kind of brought in a hired gun, if you will. Alex had been, had experience playing in Testament, so I just thought that was interesting, and you can kind of notice it, especially on this song. It's just kind of why I brought it up, but. The next track, huh?
Who the hell is Scraggy?
I don't know, but he sucks.
Yeah, this we are in complete agreement. This is the weakest song on the album, and there's really just no redeeming quality here. The intro kind of reminds me of something that would have been on Hall of the Mountain King. The verses are okay. The chorus completely sucks. Weak lyrics. I'll tell you something funny, and I listened to it a bunch this week, but there's one thing I'll say, and that's, I guess, the biggest nod to Savatage I can give for what's otherwise a really weak track. If they ever played it live, I think I'd go crazy, because I think I'd actually want to hear it live, as bad as it is. I just feel like the novelty of hearing a song like this live would actually be really cool, but I don't have very many positive things to say about it other than that.
It's like when Pearl Jam fans go ape shit when Eddie Vedder walks out with an accordion and starts playing Bugs. Like, it's an awful song.
It's an awful song, but
it's like finding a really rare baseball card. Like, you're right,
and the guy the guy might be a bench player, but because there's a rarity or a novelty factor to it, people clamor for it. I've seen Pearl Jam do Bugs live, and the song still sucks, but at the end of the day, it was cool to see for what it was. So one of these days, maybe we'll get Scraggy's Tomb, but that's all I'm going to say about that. Then you get to this Oreo cookie, right? There's this Oreo cookie in the middle of the album where you have a fantastic song sandwiched between two fantastic instrumental tracks. And I bring these three up together because it's just a little bit odd to have these two instrumental short tunes in the middle of the album with a song in the middle, but that's kind of how I look at it, as an Oreo cookie. The first instrumental is a song called Labyrinths, and all I can say about this is an absolute precursor to Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It has this fantastic piano which gives way to a slow guitar that the only way I can describe it is that this guitar sings to you. It's almost like you don't need the lyrics because you have Chris Oliva's guitar doing all the singing for you, albeit obviously without words. And eventually it picks up speed, showing his technical prowess and his technical mastery. Labyrinths may be one of my favorite Savatage songs, as short as it's a minute and a half, and it's phenomenal. It's just an absolutely beautiful piece of music.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as like a callback to Temptation Revelation, which was on Gutter Ballet, which also kind of served as the outer cookie of an Oreo with That's When right. the Crowds Are Gone, and then Silk and Steel finishing it off. This is a really cool, like, just an Oliva Brothers special, like John on the piano, Chris on the guitar, and to me, like, I can't listen to this song without having to hear Follow Me come on right afterwards, which I think is arguably the most underrated song on this album.
I completely agree with you. It's not my song of the week, but it very well could be. It was between this and one other one, and I'm going to go with another one. But to be honest with you, this is such a phenomenal tune. It's obviously Edge of Thorns gets all the love, but Follow Me is just an outstanding track. You have an acoustic guitar intro with what can maybe Zach's best vocal performance on the album from top to bottom. A fantastic drum fill, which ultimately gives way to the verses and a catchy chorus. I love the change of pace throughout this song. It's, probably their most progressive song, or at least one of them on the album. And what I love is that he throughout the verses, Zach employs this really kind of soft, almost mellow technique. And then when he starts getting into Follow Me, which kicks off the chorus, he belts out the me. And it's like, I don't know, it's just the power behind that is phenomenal. It's kind of like an innovative song in a number of ways. I just can't get over it. And even the instrumental section, right? The guitar solo again here, it just sings to you. It's like a perfect example of less being more. That's how I can describe it. It's not the most blistering solo of all time. Just great. And actually here, they actually use a bridge towards the end to get before the final chorus, which is something they don't employ all the time, but when they do, it's very effective.
I think it also is like just vintage Zach Stevens being able to do that kind of whisper sing, and then also that absolutely powerful, just belted out kind of style. I mean, he's so talented, and I'm glad you mentioned like that this is, one of his earliest works, because you're really hearing a young Zach Stevens just come in and just take this job from John Oliva. Like, I don't think there might not have been a lot of people missing John Oliva by the time this track came on. I mean, he's just such a fantastic singer. I'm sure it had to be jarring just because of the stylistic difference, because, John always had that kind of like raspy kind of voice. It's almost like going from like Bruce Springsteen to Billy Joel. Like you're going from like this more raspy kind of, sandpapery kind of vocals to somebody who, while he can do like kind of like harsher vocals, not death vocals, but just more powerful vocals, he has a much more, I think, classically kind of trained style vocals. It's kind of like the opposite of what Halloween did, from going from Kisk to Darius.
Yeah, good analogy.
But one of the interesting things was that when Streets got re-released, I think it was in 2013, they released a narrated version, and it had all of the original narrations. The whole album was supposed to be narrated instead of just Jesus Saves, as it turned out to be. And there was a lot. I mean, that album was, so I think that they had seen it as a 2-disc, a double album. The record label didn't want to do it that way. So I think there was a lot of music that got scrapped. And one of the songs was called, Larry Elbows. and Larry Elbows was a character in the Street story. Yeah. He was I guess he was involved with DT Jesus, and that song kind of tells the story. But you'll notice that the guitar solo at the end of Exit Music was lifted right from that song.
Which I never realized. And maybe it's because I only heard Larry Elbows a couple of times, but you're absolutely right, and it's outstanding. And apparently, because it never made the cut, so to speak, on Streets, they put it on the next album, and I'm glad they did, because it's just a phenomenal piece of guitar work.
It's also I recall John doing an interview saying that he has so many recordings that Chris did that he can use in the future. He used for Savatage after Chris passed. He used it for his John Oliva's Pain. So it's kind of cool that some of these like older things are getting repurposed. This was something that just happened to be repurposed while Chris was still with us. But I just thought that was really interesting that they would reuse that. It's the riff before the bridge at the end of the song that you mentioned earlier, but it's just it was kind of cool. I remember thinking like, oh, that's neat. We get to hear an old Savatage song that never got released. And then all of a sudden it got to that part and I'm like, I've heard this before. So,
yeah. And when you know the music, I guess, as well as you do, and stuff that we've been listening to for so long, you pick up on stuff like that you might not have realized if you were just more of a casual fan. But definitely a nod to Streets there, and you can see the connection. What do you think of like the other piece of the cookie here with Exit Music?
So I'm just going to say this is one of my all-time favorite piano pieces by anyone ever. It is absolutely beautiful. I just don't understand why it's in the middle of this album when it clearly should have been the last song. All I can think of is that they were thinking with vinyl/cassette brain, and they wanted it to end side A, because Sleep does make for a very great way to end the album in total, or side B, if you will. But to me, like, this song really should really close out any album that this song would appear on. I just think it's such a good song. It just goes to show you, like, John Oliva is just a absolute master at the piano, and this is just a slow grand piano style, just a piano ballad, really.
And don't they play it at the end of TSO shows, like when you're leaving the theater or the stage?
They might. I know a lot of those short Savatage instrumental tracks are used when you're coming in and out of TSO. So it wouldn't shock me, to be honest with you. I had made a playlist years ago of just a lot of like ballady, mellow, kind of like a nighttime go to sleep kind of mix. And believe it or not, I didn't make this the last song. It was the second to last song, and then the last song was "Longing" by Helloween. I should send you this playlist because it's like, I don't think there's there's nothing that came out after like 1999 on this list. Nice. But it's all just kind of like ballads and power ballads and just mellow stuff that, like, I sometimes put it on, like, if I've had a few and I'm like laying in bed and I'm kind of like not ready to fall asleep right away, I'll just put this on and it just kind of lulls me. I don't know if I ever even make it to like the third track. But
post it this week so that everyone can take a listen.
Yeah. I'll add it to our Spotify playlists.
Love it.
See, provided I can find all the songs on Spotify. But I just always thought this was such a cool song, and I think, and it was the last song on Mike's Blood, Fire, and Metal Volume 1 mixtape that I have as a playlist. He ended his tape with Hall of the Mountain King, followed by Exit Music. So clearly Mike thought this should have been the last song too. So shout out to Mike. We'll be mentioning him again shortly, but really fantastic song. Even if you're not a big fan of metal, or you don't like Savatage or whatever it is, I'm not sure why you would be listening to this podcast, but listen to that song. It's really, really fantastic.
No argument here. Side 2 or side B kicks off with another track that is a bit of a filler tune for me, and that's Degrees of Sanity. It's an interesting song, and there's kind of a lot going on here. This really, really heavy riff kind of takes over after a kind of a short guitar intro. But here again, Zach is what makes this song, and I can't imagine anybody else singing this song. Not my favorite. Even the instrumental section here is slightly uninspired. I found it an odd choice to kind of come after Exit Music. Maybe your opinion differs. Not my favorite tune. Kind of I don't know, just kind of a filler track for me.
My opinion differs.
Okay, good. I'm glad you like this one.
I do. I like this quite a bit, and it kind of goes back to years ago when we were still in high school. We had a mutual friend named Steve who got he found a Japanese copy of I think it was called The Best and the Rest, or the Best and the Rest and the Rare. I might be confusing it with Helloween, who had a compilation album the same. And I had like traded a couple of CDs because I wanted it so bad, because like just getting imported CDs was kind of hard to do, and it was like a crown jewel to me that I wanted to have for my collection. And I always thought it was interesting that this song was on it. I was like, what? Like, Degrees of Sanity on a Savatage best of is interesting. And I think ever since then, I think I paid more attention to the song, almost like, you know, because I want to say those songs were fan voted by like a Japanese magazine. So clearly enough people cared about it to vote it onto a greatest hits album. It's towards the top of my favorite songs in this album, but probably like not in the top 3 or 4, but I do like it. I think it's a good song. I think it's a good way to kind of start out what I consider to be like the second half of the album, which I think is really good. And I think that I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now when I was younger. I think I was really more into like Edge of Thorns and He Carves His Stone and Follow Me. And then it was kind of like, I didn't care too much about much else until Sleep came around. But going back and listening to this again, man, the second half of this album is really strong as far as I'm concerned.
Although Degrees of Sanity is not my favorite, it really begins to pick up with Conversation Piece, in my opinion. What do you think about that one?
Awesome. Another, I think, along with Follow Me, one of the more underrated, not just on this album, I think one of the more underrated Savatage songs ever. Just really cool stop and go guitar work to kind of kick things off. And then the bridge, or is it the bridge or the chorus? It's just all of it is so catchy. It's so well written, and Zach just knocks it out of the park. Just a really, really cool song, and
catchy, and
very, very typical of the Savatage's ability to make a very mid-paced song like memorable.
It's slightly repetitive, but not to the point of excess. And who doesn't love conversations over tea? So like over a cup of tea. I mean, let's call it for what it is. Something about this song is so charming to me, and maybe it's the lyrical content, but I just love it. I think it's a great chorus, really catchy verses, and a very underrated tune that nobody seems to talk about, no pun intended. And I just think it's leading up to one of the 2 ballads. And you know, we spoke last week when we were talking about Luca Turilli's solo album about, you know, the 2 ballads on that, and how we agreed that, you know, one was markedly better than the other. I think you'd be hard pressed to say that about the 2 ballads on this album. All That I Bleed is the first of the 2, but they're both amazing in their own way. What I love about this is here you're basically, again, this is John Olive at his best on the piano with Zach's intoxicating vocals over the top, and how the song slowly gets heavier and heavier towards the end and turns into a power ballad. When I spoke about the Beatles and the songwriting earlier, this is one of those tracks that really the songwriting is just so great. And when you listen to the lyrics, you can actually visualize what they're talking about. And they don't use big words. They don't use flowery language. But this is where John and Paul were masters of their domain. And you know, if I could sing, this would be a karaoke song for me. I just think it's a fantastic tune, and it actually reminds me of something that TSO would do about 3 years later when they sang Old City Bar, and I just absolutely love this track.
Yeah, this is a really, I mean, if you like power ballads, holy hell, this is really, really fantastic, and made an appearance on my volume 2 of mellow metal songs. I was obsessed with this song when I was probably like 16, 17. I remember going on vacation with my family and just like listening to it on headphones. I think it was right after like Wake of Magellan had just come out, and I got to take the album and listen to it for the first time, like on a plane and while I was on vacation. And all I did was listen to Wake of Magellan and Edge of Thorns while I was on that trip. But this song, I would just blast into my headphones, because just when it gets going, it's goosebumps. Like, it's just the orchestration, the vocals, everything. And then the fact that like it had this slow piano, like really wispy vocals kind of like leading up to it. Like, it really kind of almost lulls you into a sense of false security and then just blows your socks off. I really like the song, and I'm glad you mentioned the Beatles, because the piano, the way the piano comes in at the beginning, reminds me a lot of Let It Be. So I'm be willing to bet that might have been in the back of John's head when this song was written. But yeah, this is just, holy crap, what a performance by Zach, and just a really fantastic song. Yeah, just really, really awesome stuff.
I'm going to leave it there because it's well said. You know, Brian Clough, when he made the request, talked about the next track, and he said Damien is an overlooked gem. I have a feeling you're going to share that sentiment, or at least there's a nostalgia factor here. You want to tell them why?
You know, I never really cared for this song originally, and our mutual friend Mike just like, I think he just beat it over our heads that it was a good song until I agreed.
I never liked this song.
And now I listen to it, and I like it a lot. I think it's really good. It's like another kind of mid-paced song, but it's got a great chorus. The verses are really awesome. I love Zach's vocals on here. The solos are awesome. I'm not sure. Mike saw something in the song when we didn't, so shout out to Mike. This is the one that's probably grown on me the most over the years. Maybe miles away. We'll get there shortly. But this track, I never appreciated this when we were younger, but now I would put it up there with many of the other tracks on this. So shout out to Brian and Mike, because they definitely saw something when I initially didn't, but I can appreciate it now. It might have been just because Mike would just start screaming Damien, like when no one would expect it. And then you'd pee a little and you'd be like, you know, F this song. So
well said.
It was funny because I was making dinner earlier, and I just had Savatage shuffling on Apple Music, and Paragons of Innocence came on. And that's another song that reminds me of Mike just going ape shit in high school to a song, with just like, you know, being the social butterfly that he is, listening to headphones everywhere he went while everybody else was trying to have a conversation. And then out of nowhere, you just hear Paragons of Innocence screaming in Nick's basement. Shout out to Nick's basement. It's great. And I'll tell you something else that I noticed for the first time is that, like, there's, with the verses, you kind of hear this like kind of staccato piano going on from John Oliva, which I actually noticed again listening to Larry Elbows. It just kind of has that kind of like really deliberate pace. And I guess it kind of is like one of the many John Oliva signature styles, I guess. But I've completely done a 180 on this song. I'm a big fan of Damien now, and so between Brian and Mike, you guys were right.
Yeah, no question about it. The next track is my song of the week.
Let the darkness roll in, let it wipe the light away. In the distance, always calling, Morpheus, he beckons play. Still the morning is preordained, but I believe light is the source of all our pain.
I love this track, and I had mentioned "Follow Me" earlier as one of the real gems on this track outside of "Edge of Thorns." This is the other one. This track is Savatage in all its brilliance. It has really what I consider kind of an upbeat guitar intro, and although the lyrics are kind of dark, this to me is one of the most uplifting songs I've ever heard in my life. It's just a song that puts a smile on my face. If I was going to make a one disc Savatage best of, as hard as that would be, this song would probably be on there with Edge of Thorns and one of the two ballads as the representatives from this album. It has the perfect blend of metal and melody, where you have these shredding guitar solos and this just very proggy melody that kind of drives the rest of the song. An absolute gem. 10 out of 10. This song kicks ass.
Did you like this song at all? Or?
It was okay. No. What tell me what you think. Am I overblown with this, or is it maybe it's just me?
You know, I'll be honest with you. When I didn't care for this song at all when I was a lot younger, and I don't know why, because now I listen to it and I'm like, man, this song really freaking slaps. I mean, again, it starts out very chill, and then about a minute and a half in, it just picks up, and it really is a very kind of upbeat, sounding song. It really kind of picks you up, and I got to listen to it. I listened to the whole album today, mostly in the car. Which, by the way, I sang "All That I Bleed" in my car like it was carpool karaoke. I'm so glad no one heard that. It was probably very embarrassing, but I was amazed at, and not just that song, but I'm just amazed at how many Savatage lyrics are just embedded in my head. That I was, full disclosure, my girlfriend hasn't been home all day today, so I have just been singing my heart out all day, Savatage songs, and I just am blown away by how many lyrics from this band I remember. And "All That I Believe" is one of those songs where I know every last word. But getting back to this is I feel like this song is a bit of an outlier as far as, I mean, the album is kind of all over the place, but I feel like maybe that's why I didn't like it when I was younger, because it feels like it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the songs. But I agree with you. It's a really, really great song. And for being the second longest song on the album, it doesn't drag at all. And I like that it kind of feels like it's almost two different songs, because it starts out kind of chill, and then you get a little bit more of an upbeat song about a minute and a half in, like I said before, and just good stuff. More fantastic, Zach vocals, and another, more great guitar solos, and yeah. Like I said, this whole second half of the album is really quite good.
And then we go to sleep, as we had mentioned earlier, with the second of the two ballads to end this. But this one, instead of having the piano, it's just, acoustic. This is whereas "All That I Bleed" was John and Zach. This is really Chris and Zach with just a guitar and a beautiful, obviously vocals. What I love about this song, though, obviously, in addition to the lyrics, which almost make you want to cry because it's just so beautiful, the guitar tone, the sound, the sonic sound that comes out of Chris's guitar is just phenomenal for a ballad. Nobody writes ballads like this band. There were, like, if you think about like all the different bands we listen to, and they run the gamut from all over the place, Savatage ballads are the best. They truly are. And I don't say that as, the fanboy that I am. I can't think of any band that writes ballads like this. I mean, I'm not saying that bands don't have great songs. Porcupine Tree has some great ballads. Anathema has some great ballads, but nobody does this. We'll get there. Don't worry. What a way to end it, right? Can you think of a way? I mean, obviously I can understand exit music, but if you're not going to choose that, this is a great way to end it.
Yeah, this is just, I mean, it almost makes you sad that you didn't get to have more songs like this with Chris and Zach together. It really is just a beautiful song. It's a great way to end it. When I was living with our friend Brian, he had learned how to play the song on his guitar, and we tried recording like me singing and him playing guitar to this song, and like I think this song even can make me sound passable. It's just because it's kind of in a lower register, and it's just, oh my god, it's a lovely song. If I could find it, I'll try to share it. There's a really cool version of this song done by the West Coast TSO group with Jeff Scott Soto singing this, which is really, really cool. It's probably a pretty raggedy video because it was probably from somebody's cell phone, and this was back before we had like, you know, studio level video capabilities on our phones. But I just remember being very impressed with Jeff's rendition. But yeah, just, I mean, it's amazing the variation of what Zach can do as a vocalist between doing this really like mellow, whispery kind of vocals versus his like powerful, strong vocals that he does in songs like He Carves the Stone. I mean, he really shows all of his sides and everything he can do on this debut album for him. So yeah, great way to end it.
And just a perfect album to introduce a Savatage fan to, right? As Brian had pointed out, this has it all. It has a nod to the old school. It has it serves as a precursor to what's to come. Just a fantastic, fantastic album. And I'm going to ask you to rate this shortly, but I haven't heard your track of the week, so it's time to make a decision.
Yeah, it's I mean, I might have gone with Edge of Thorns, but you know what? I'm gonna let Brian have this one. So just makes my life slightly easier in making a choice. Man, I mean, I guess I'm kind of between All That I Bleed and Follow Me. I'm gonna go with All That I Bleed, just so we have a little bit of that kind of ballady sound.
Perfect
as a representation for this album. But I mean, I have to say, like, Edge of Thorns, Follow Me, Conversation Piece, All That I Bleed, Miles Away, Sleep. These are like some of my all-time favorite Savatage songs. And I don't know if I really even want to wait another year to talk about this band, because I mean, there's just, as you can tell, we've been, you know, gushing for the last hour or so. There's just so much going on, meat on the bones, as you would say, on all these albums. And I definitely want to talk about Handful of Rain, just because it's holds a very special place in my heart as the first metal album I ever bought or owned. And it's just very interesting considering everything that was going on with the band at the time. But I'm sure we'll get to it at some point. But yeah, as far as rating it goes, I'll be honest, like, on a whole, I don't love this album quite as much as I love Dead Winter Dead. I don't remember what I gave Dead Winter Dead, but I'm gonna guess it was probably like a 9.5 if I had to take a stab at it. For me, I would say this album is probably an 8.75. I feel like a 9 is almost just a little too high, just because I feel like the first half is a little bit lackluster compared to the second half. But it's still, I mean, has some of the most iconic Savatage songs ever. It's Zach Stevens' debut. It's Chris Oliva's, unfortunate swan song. And it's kind of interesting because it marks the end and the beginning of a lot of parts of Savatage, because this would be the end of Steve Wackles as their drummer. It would be the last album that Chris Oliva would play guitar on. It's the first album that Zach Stevens is on. It's the first album that John Oliva is not the main vocal guy, I guess, on the album. I think that they would kind of find when they got to Dead Winter Dead, they found this groove, bringing in, Al Pitrelli and Chris Caffrey and Jeff Plate to kind of round out the band and kind of put John Oliva's face back back in the forefront of the band again. But I mean, I will say that this did kind of leave me wanting to hear more of what the Chris/Zach era of Savatage could have been, and it sucks that we got Chris taken away from us. I mean, God only knows where we would be in Savatage history if the band would have continued beyond, the early 2000s after Poets and Madmen. I mean, one can only guess. So,
it's almost depressing.
Yeah. What about you? What do you give this on a scale of 1 to 10?
First of all, I agree. I don't know that I want to wait another year to do this again, just because I love them so much. To me, it's an 8.5. I love the album, and there's, 3/4 of this album I really, really enjoy. And then it loses me at certain points, but for the most part, it's good. And I would put up certain songs with any of the stuff in the back catalog. But top to bottom, I do think Dead Winter Dead and The Wake of Magellan are better albums. I think Streets arguably is a better album, and certainly a lot of Gutter Ballet as well. But this is, maybe a notch, maybe 2 notches below them. But it's a very good Savatage album is better than most bands' great albums. So that's what this is, right? This is a very good Savatage album, not their best, but a very good one, and it's certainly better than a lot of bands' great stuff. So it's an 8.5 for me, and I guess that really kind of puts a bow on it, right? It's what you said was spot on. What could have been, and I almost don't want to think about it, but what I do want to do is now go listen to the rest of their stuff, and that's probably what I'll do.
Before we wrap it up, I remember that Mike had kind of made a comment like when the podcast first started about kind of shining a spotlight on album art, and I feel like this album is. I remember getting this album and thinking that, and I might still argue this is my favorite Savatage album cover. It's actually Chris Oliva's wife that is the model that they used for the album cover. Her name was Dawn. Presumably still is Dawn. But I just love how she's kind of like this almost fairy-esque, like beautiful woman. And then like there's this kind of like creepy, the branches of the trees are like this creepy face that like I just look at it and I assume it's just John Oliva, and like that's John Oliva's face being on this album somehow, even though he has like doesn't really get much credit as far as like a performing band member. But I just think I believe Gary Smith, who did a lot of front and back covers for Savatage through the years, and also airbrushed Chris's guitars. He was the one who painted this unbelievable album art. So I remember just getting this album and thinking to myself like that. It's just very visually impressive, and I this is something I would love to own on vinyl, just because the size of a CD liner note just doesn't do the artwork justice. So
well said.
There's your third shout out, Mike. Third shout out. There's a little talk about the cover art for you.
That's you got your cover art discussion. Well said. And like just worth noting for sure. And I think that'll do it. I think this is a good one, and it's an album that I will continue to listen to until the end of time. There's no question about that one.
Yeah, it's in all honesty, like, I mean, I don't know that there's any Savatage album that isn't an essential listen. If you're a fan of this band, they all are. But this is definitely, one of those albums, and you can't really. I mean, to me, like, I can't listen to Streets and then go directly to Handful of Rain. Like, I have to listen to Edge of Thorns to kind of bridge that gap. So. Yeah, I'm so glad that Brian chose this. This is such a like. If you had put it on us to choose with like the next Savatage album to talk about after Dead Winter Dead, I don't. It's hard to choose because Streets is iconic, and Wake of Magellan, at least to me, is iconic, and Gutter Ballet and Hall of the Mountain King, and even like the older albums like Sirens and Power of the Night. Hell, I didn't even do an episode on Fight for the Rock just to talk more about Savatage. I mean,
I'm sure we'll get there. I would love to do that as well, because I have thoughts about that, but that'll take us into another podcast altogether. That Thanks for choosing it, Brian. We hope we did. We hope it did it justice. Let the requests keep on coming. We catalog these things, and we have a whole bunch of them in the queue. But at the same time, a lot of repeat requests from people that have wanted multiple things. So we do see what everyone wants, and obviously, like I said, we track this stuff. So send us a request if there's anything you guys want to hear. Maybe we'll put something on social media about that during the week. But a couple of news items. We mentioned Eddie Vedder earlier today. Eddie Vedder actually just announced a couple of tour dates in February. He's doing a couple of shows in New York, New Jersey, Chicago, out west, and always good to see his solo stuff. Obviously, we did an episode on Pearl Jam's 10 back in the archives, so definitely check that out if you're a Pearl Jam fan. And what I can only describe as some of the most exciting news of the week for me, a new Iron Maiden tour. And I caught the first leg of Legacy of the Beast, and it was probably my favorite Iron Maiden show that I've ever seen. And I've been to quite a few of them. I just think that they are getting better and better and better, which I don't know how you do that after 40 plus years, but somehow they're doing it. What I didn't realize right away was that the openers for this tour out west is Trivium, a really solid metal band and a band that, has just gotten better with time as well. And by me on the East Coast and in the South, Within Temptation opening for Iron Maiden. I never thought I would see this band in an arena, but it's going to be a fun show. And I'll tell you something, having seen Dream Theater open for Iron Maiden, the only thing that would be cooler would be seeing Within Temptation open for them. I'm looking forward to this. And the hits, I think the tour kicks off in Texas in September, ultimately ends in Tampa in October, and they're coming just down the block for me in late October. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
I will be definitely joining you for that, because the opportunity to see Within Temptation play in an arena in the United States is just too good to pass up. And as far as Eddie Vedder goes, I've actually had the pleasure of seeing him perform live without Pearl Jam. And if you want to just see like a completely different experience, just a lot more chill, a little bit more storytelling, it's a hell of a show. He's got a new album called Earthlings coming out early next year. There's already 2 singles, Long Way and The Haves. Just very different. If you like Eddie Vedder's voice, but you think Pearl Jam's a little too heavy, again, not sure why you're listening to this podcast, but his solo stuff is definitely more, I would say, more folksy and a little bit more on the acoustic side. I love his songs that he did for the Into the Wild soundtrack. But yeah, definitely recommend seeing both of those tours. 2 very different tours, but both definitely worth checking out.
Well said. And now we get to my album for next week. I went back and forth with this one, and I think I had mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago how just absolutely, I guess, enamored I was with the newest album by Elevati that came out in 2019. It was a top 5 album for me. Not going to choose that, but I bring that up because I was listening to some of my material on shuffle, which is something that unfortunately I just don't do as much as I probably should. But I did, and I kind of realized a couple of things. Number one, a song from the back catalog came on called A Rose for Apana. It was from their 2012 release, Helveteos. I realized how grossly negligent I am when it comes to Anna Murphy's material in this band. I'm familiar with her work in Cellar Darling. I've heard a lot of the old material, but I never really had a chance to absorb it. So I wanted to go back to 2012 and do Elevati's Helveteos album. I thought it would be different, something a little folky, and just, I adore her as a musician, so I think that it would be a nice blend to kind of go back into the archives and do something a little deeper, or a deeper dive into a band that I'm familiar with, but just not as familiar as that I probably should be.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, so I'm glad that you chose that one. Yeah, this is a band I've always enjoyed, but just don't know that much just don't know that much material by. I love their most recent album that came out 2 years ago. That song, on Biramus, I'm probably butchered it, but that was one of my favorites from 2019. So yeah, that's cool. I definitely look forward to giving that a deeper dive.
Yep, and with that, we'll put a bow on it. We'll come back next week with that. It'll be your choice the week after, and we're getting closer to our albums of the year and our kind of year-end wrap-up episode, which I'm looking forward to as well. So keep the requests coming, as I mentioned earlier. Thanks for all the love and support, and we love the engagement, so keep it coming. The best thing you can do, tell a friend about the show. If there's anyone else that you think would enjoy it, definitely share our links, share our social media, and word of mouth is definitely the best way to get our product out to everyone and get more ears on it. We know you're out there. We have people listening all over the world, and we certainly appreciate that. But it never hurts to have more people and more ears engage with us and listen to the show. So thanks a lot, Chris. Enjoy the week, and I will definitely talk to you soon.
Sounds good. You do the same, and I think I'm going to be finding myself sprinkling in a lot more Savatage over the next couple of weeks. And it's funny because I haven't even started listening to Trans-Siberian Orchestra yet, and Christmas is just a few weeks away. So maybe I'll have to mix it up, a little TSO, a little Savatage, little L80, little bit of everything. And by the way, if you haven't, check out the Kirsten Grohl Hanukkah sessions on YouTube. Just absolute fire from Dave Grohl. And I'm not sure what Kirsten's first name is. I'm not really even... Greg Kirsten. Him and Dave Grohl just do these covers. And the first one they did for 2021 it's a must. It's just a must watch and listen. Watch the video of Lisa Loeb's Stay. Dave Grohl wears a dress. I'm just going to leave it at that.
I think that sums it up beautifully. You sent it to me, and Dave Grohl wears a dress. And with that, we'll catch you next week. Have a good one, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon when we come back with some Elevating. Enjoy.
Have a good one.
Hey there.